qualified herbalists, and differential diagnosis being a science, taught along the lines of herbal medicine and the approach to treatment of disease. And so we came here back in 2001 and started up our business, Western Botanical Medicine, providing medicinal plant extracts, carrying on that kind of tradition from England and from what is there widely available from herbalists, consulting with patients about different diseases and different diagnoses, and the herbalist would produce a formula which would be given to the patient, and the patient would be followed up in 2 weeks and 4 weeks, etc. So coming here was very much the same kind of thing, in terms of starting a practice and getting a dispensary running, and then finding out we had a business to be had from supplying local co-ops with herbs and tinctures, and then we started this radio show back in 2003, I think it was. So anyway, this second month of the expose on frankincense, like I said, when I started looking at the papers and the pharmacology for frankincense, it was an incredible amount of information. And like I said, I've been interested in biblical herbs from the perspective of what was available to people back in 0 AD and before, and obviously the plant families that were represented were the Mediterranean basin, so Israel being there on the east coast of the Mediterranean, and then you have Asia Minor, what we would currently call Turkey, and Greece to the north, and carrying on west you'd find Italy and Spain, and then working your way back from Israel on the far east side, going south, you'd work your way through basically Ethiopia and Oman, and you'd come around to Egypt and Libya, and then to Morocco. So a lot of the commerce in the kind of, what do you call them, biblical times, I guess. Let's just say it's the biblical times from pre-Jesus. Frankincense and myrrh. So interestingly enough, those two plants were highly revered in biblical times, would have been very expensive, would have had incredible healing power, and today the pharmacology of both myrrh and frankincense is borne out, scientifically proving and validating exactly why these plants were so revered and so useful in the treatment of so many different pathologies. And so last month I started the discourse of frankincense. I mentioned the fact that in the trade, we typically have Boswellia sacra in stock. So this is one of those Boswellias that is available from that part of the eastern side of the Mediterranean, the southern eastern side in Somalia. But Boswellia serrata, Boswellia carteri, and Boswellia frureana are the other three species of Boswellia. So historically, just to quickly go recap over last month, historically they've been highly prized and valued for perfumes, cosmetics, incense, and for their religious and spiritual role, particularly in those civilizations that were mentioned in the basin of the Mediterranean, so Egypt, Babylon, Jerusalem, and Rome. Essentially, the Chinese also, who've had a huge history of traditional Chinese medicine dating thousands of years, there is a a famous kind of traditional Chinese preparation called the Hong Zhu Wang. Sorry, no, that was the person who wrote the formula for it. Sorry, the actual formula was gallbladder stones. Gallbladder stones. This is kind of interesting. The Chinese like animal parts. They either use the animal parts, either the organs of the animal, or in some cases, some of these extra stones from cattle, and then Boswellia sacra and Commiphora momo, so myrrh. So both those two herbs, both Commiphora, both myrrh and frankincense, were used along with these gallbladder stones in a famous Chinese pill called the Zi Huang pill. And essentially, they've done study in pharmacology on this Zi Huang pill and saying that actually it does induce cancer cell apoptosis. So we understand apoptosis is a kind of programmed cell death, and anything, as far as I'm concerned, that creates programmed cell death in a cell that's otherwise quote-unquote eternal and wants to carry on growing and taking you over, is a good thing. So ultimately, when these cancers spontaneously arise through DNA mutation and radiation damage and any other insults to the genome, they basically lose their programmed cell death, so their life is no longer finite. It becomes infinite. And then the other thing is, they also studied cancer cell types being treated with this particular Zi Huang pill, and said that the cell migration was also interrupted, the invasion and the angiogenesis, which is the blood supply, essentially that cancers recruit so they can grow massively and out of control. This is also blocked. And then also that the hypercoagulation that you find in cancers and in tumors and the microenvironment was also affected negatively. So as a adjuvant treatment for cancer, this certainly was looked at, and it certainly had plenty of pharmacology to support its effects. So I mentioned the fact that a single Boswellia tree then can produce 1 to 3 kilos of resin per season. Obviously, the tree has to be wounded, mechanically wounded, to secrete this resin, which is protective. And as I mentioned last week, and I've mentioned many times, when it comes to plant parts and plant extracts that are used in herbal medicine, medicinally, we have to remember that a lot of these plants produce these things as chemical defensins. They're not particularly there because they're our therapeutic pharmacy. A lot of these things are either anti-feedant, or they are interrupting the cell cycle of a particular insect that wants to consume it or feed on it. So many times, a lot of these components, they have specific biological roles within the insects that the plant is trying to defend itself from. So not to think that these things were just purely created for our benefit. They are there for the plant's benefit to carry on their life and reproduce just as much as we want to carry on living and reproduce. And naturally, they produce these substances to try and support their longevity. We just happen to have come across this, the information, or at least stumbled upon by accident in some cases, that these compounds actually benefit us. So how this all happens, and how over the last X amount of 1,000 years we've gotten this knowledge, is quite incredible, because some of these things, I don't quite know who actually stumbled upon it and who actually figured out that these things were what we now know they are through scientific experiment, that we're now able to show in great detail exactly mechanistically how these things work. So 1 to 3 kilos of resin per tree, and it's estimated that between 2,000 and 4,000 tons of frankincense are produced worldwide, with Somalia becoming the largest producer, accounting for about 60 to 70% of global production. Okay, so I went over and commented on some of those quote-unquote subject headings for pharmacology of frankincense, and I covered things like the antibacterial activity, mentioning the fact that the resin within Boswellia was responsible essentially for the antibacterial effectiveness, and that the acetyl-keto-boswellic acid, one of those specific antibacterial properties, was known, and that I also mentioned that the phenolic acids in boswellic acid is responsible for the resin's antibacterial characteristics. Then I moved on to discuss some of the antifungal benefits of boswellia resin, and then mentioned the fact that there was a pretty extraordinary efficacy against many different fungal strains, and that a couple of researchers, Kamada et al. And Mothana et al. Had produced scientific papers demonstrating the antifungal effect. So far we're looking at antibacterial activity and antifungal activity. This certainly would have been very useful in biblical times when many different disease processes were happening for which people didn't at all understand, and there were all sorts of different claims for different diseases arising in people, from bad spirits to the water or whatever. But I'm not saying these people weren't intelligent, but I think they were actually far more intelligent than most people today are. I think they had far more contact with nature, and they were far more observant of things that plants can teach you. You know, there's a wealth of information to be had from nature if you just observe it. Anyway, so looking at the anti-inflammatory properties, so we've done antibacterial, antifungal. The anti-inflammatory activity showing that these, when we get inflammation in our bodies, cytokines typically are those things that are responsible for causing inflammation. Now, sometimes the inflammation is useful. It's not to say that inflammation doesn't have a purpose. It does. But uncontrolled inflammation without any real need for it is definitely counterproductive. Looking at cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-1 and interleukin-6, these are kind of the main three cytokines that contribute to most of the inflammatory signalers, saying that these, basically the cytokines are essential in controlling both acute and long-term inflammation, and that the components within frankincense actually have a blocking action of these pro-inflammatory cytokines. So inflammatory skin disorders and inflammatory conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, etc., even at a kind of core level, can be treated with frankincense, specifically because it's blocking these different cytokines. There was also plenty of other information talking about the eicosanoids, which are another group of compounds within frankincense. There's a host. If you look at the table of individual components listed, if you want to basically take boswellia extract, run it through HPTLC or some other form of quantifying the chemicals within it, you'll find there's over 100 different compounds, many of which have very specific activities physiologically and pharmacologically. So eicosanoids were one group of compounds and are shown to be effective lipid mediators of inflammation, especially leukotrienes, prostaglandins, and lipoxin. Okay, so the terpenes found within frankincense, many people understand terpenes in this area certainly from aromatic plant production, and monoterpenes, diterpenes, triterpenes, and tetracyclic terpenic acids, and 4 important pentacyclic triterpenic acids, including boswellic acid, acetyl boswellic acid, 11-keto boswellic acid, and acetyl 11-keto boswellic acid, are abundant in the resinous portions of boswellia. Now, the most effective inhibitor of 5-lipoxygenase, which is another key enzyme in the manufacture of leukotrienes from arachidonic acid, is acetyl 11-keto boswellic acid. And if you look at frankincense literature, the AKBA moniker, the kind of shorthand term for this product, acetyl 11-keto boswellic acid, basically prevents the formation of inflammatory mediators. So it also blocks nitric oxide synthase and, like I said, COX-2, cyclooxygenase, nuclear factor beta. Okay, so anti-inflammatory properties covered, and antioxidant. Again, boswellia resin, the gum resins have been studied pharmacokinetically to see how they're acting, and they found to be a moderate to powerful CYP enzyme inhibitor. So we've covered CYP enzymes and specifically P450, cytochrome P450. These enzymes are important catalysts for the oxidation of organic molecules, including metabolic intermediaries like lipids and steroidal hormones. So as an immunomodulator, that was the last thing I covered last month. So these botanical polysaccharides are thought to exert their therapeutic effects, including immunostimulatory, anti-tumor, antibacterial, and other qualities by activating macrophages, which are a group of cells that are important for mopping up the elements of the blood that shouldn't be there, whatever those things are that are not supposed to be there. So that's where I got to, and now we're going to look at the anti-cancer activity of frankincense. So let's get into some of the anti-cancer research and discuss some of those things that have been found, and specifically, again, the relative chemicals responsible. So, looking at the triterpenoid acids produced from Boswellia, these have been shown to exhibit anti-proliferative properties. They show themselves as cytotoxic and cytostatic. So cytotoxics kill cancer cells, and cytostatics prevent the growth and the multiplication in the cell cycle. It arrests the cell cycle, so that cytostatic compounds basically stop tumor growth, whereas cytotoxics actually reduce and destroy cancers. So within the human body, there is what's known as the extracellular signal-related kinases. These are a group of chemicals, the ERK, that are involved in signal transduction pathways. They may be at least partially responsible for acetyl-keto-boswellic acid's lethal effects on meningioma cells. Now, a series of proteins make up this route, which carries signals from cell surface receptors to the DNA inside the cell. And compared to pure 3-O-acetyl 11-keto-beta-boswellic acid, a particular Boswellia extract from Boswellia serrata that's enriched with defined amounts of boswellic acid, including acetyl 11-keto-beta-boswellic acid, has shown better efficiency in inhibiting cancer cell growth. And in vitro tests on the element boswellic acid acetate, which is taken out of Boswellia carteri, demonstrate its ability to cause leukemia cells to differentiate and die. So there's another direct reference to leukemia as a cell group in which frankincense has shown itself to be a good selection for further pharmacological study. Okay, so again, looking at the capacity to activate genes that control cell cycle arrest, as well as growth inhibition and apoptosis, which may be used as an alternative bladder cancer therapeutic. Other studies were done for bladder cancer, and again, these same components were shown to be beneficial in arresting cancer. Regarding anti-arthritic qualities for rheumatoid arthritis, as I mentioned a little while back, seeing as arthritis affects about 0.5 to 2% of the population in Europe and about 2 to 3% of the US population, steroids, non-steroidal and anti-inflammatory medications, the NSAIDs, and biological medicines such as TNF-alpha and interleukin-1 beta antagonists are examples of traditional pharmaceutical therapy. A study done notably by Fan et al. Found that an acetone extract, which I'm not condoning acetone, but an acetone extract of the gum resin of Boswellia carteri lowers the arthritic scores. In a study on rat paw edema, it was decreased considerably, lowering local tissue tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin levels in rats. And a similar study was carried out with 30 patients who had knee osteoarthritis. This was a study done in 2005. All of those who received Boswellia treatment reported less discomfort, more flexible knees, longer walking distances, and many other locomotion benefits. Additionally, the frequency of knee joint swelling decreased. Now, this suggests that Boswellia extract may be beneficial for people with knee osteoarthritis, and it may also be useful for people with other types of arthritis. You're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM. From 7:30 until the end of the show at 8 o'clock, we'd be very welcome to call in with questions related to frankincense, anything that we haven't covered yet, or any other subject of herbal medicine or health in general. The number's 707-923-3911. So from 7:30 until the top of the hour here at 5 to 8, we'll be welcoming calls. So, both compounds, interleukin-4 and interleukin-10, have potent anti-inflammatory effects and stop bone and cartilage deterioration in rheumatoid arthritis. And a researcher called Borelli discovered that Boswellia serrata extracts at a dosage of 200 milligrams per kilogram alter cytokine equilibrium toward a pattern that protects bone by lowering levels of TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 and interferon gamma, while boosting levels of interleukin-10. So boswellic acid's ability to reduce inflammation is a result of how they work. So, looking at gastrointestinal stimulatory activity, again, some notable work has been done here in research, finding a lot of this material out. So Miller et al. Emphasized the significance of Boswellia species as significant medicinal plants noted for decreasing fever, pain and stomach discomfort. Notably, patients with chronic colitis were included in the investigation. Now, the effects of Boswellia serrata resin, which was administered at a dose of 300 milligrams 3 times daily for 6 weeks, were compared to those of sulfasalazine, the study's control. The evaluation, which considered a number of variables, also included tests of hemoglobin, serum iron, calcium, phosphorus, proteins, total leukocytes, and eosinophils. According to the results, 90% of those who received Boswellia gum resin experienced improvements in at least one of the evaluated criteria. And comparatively, 60% of the participants in the control group experienced the same outcomes. Additionally, remission was observed in 70% of patients who received Boswellia gum resin compared to 40% of those who received sulfasalazine treatment, showing that there was a clear benefit from the Boswellia versus the regular pharmaceutical. The anti-asthmatic activity of Boswellia has also been discussed. Traditionally, Boswellia has earned a reputation as a versatile remedy for respiratory conditions including catarrh, cough, asthma, and bronchitis. The therapeutic effects of Boswellia are attributed to its rich content of boswellic acid, which are higher terpenoids. Now, these compounds play a pivotal role in inhibiting the biosynthesis, as we've mentioned here, of leukotrienes, which are molecules that promote inflammation in various chronic inflammatory diseases. And additionally, research has shown that Boswellia, particularly the alcohol extract of Boswellia serrata, has the ability to relieve asthma sufferers. Through their impact on a number of physiological processes, boswellic acids are proven to have anti-asthmatic properties, and boswellic acids have demonstrated promise in the treatment of asthma by enhancing the mitogen-activated protein kinase, the MAPK pathway, controlling intracellular calcium levels and preventing leukotriene production. In preclinical studies, boswellic acids have been found to lessen the damaging effects of bronchial leukotrienes in animal models, and this has resulted in the weakening of cellular infiltration, the preservation of lung architecture, and a reduction in lung fibrosis. Moreover, in a rodent model of asthma, research conducted by Liu et al. Has shown that boswellic acid treatment leads to the amelioration of airway hyperresponsiveness, as well as suppression of Th2 cytokine secretion and mitigation of airway inflammation. So the therapeutic action of boswellic acid in addressing allergic responses holds promise for the treatment of asthma. Now, in herbal medicine, we typically talk about synergistic effects. I think when I was first studying herbal medicine and I came across these concepts, I guess I was a little bit dubious. I wasn't, didn't just believe everything I was taught. I kind of always had an inquiring, questioning mind and wondered whether or not something else might be at work. So the idea of synergy, I totally understand it at this point anyway, and recognize that it's a very real not just a concept, but a very real physical reality. So in terms of looking at herbs, I've never been at all a believer or a supporter of isolated compounds. Here, I think in the States especially, there is a very strong market-driven, sales-oriented drive to produce compounds that are isolated and standardized or concentrated and isolated, so that they can be marketed and advertised as the latest and greatest. I think of curcumin within turmeric as an example of that. It's one of very many. But I'm not at all a believer in isolated substances, because that's absolutely not natural. I think you have to understand that in our interaction with our environment, we rarely come into contact with specific isolated examples of anything. And the plant world is extremely rich, complex, and diverse. So when you look at any plant compounds, they are typically, what we would say is that they are in balance, and that you might find a particular herb might have an inflammatory function within the chemicals, but you will also find something along the order of antioxidant activity within that, which actually counters and buffers it. So to pull out a single ingredient is really barking up the wrong tree, I think, and is purely an advertising, marketing attempt to rebrand an existing product. So we'll look at the synergistic effects of frankincense here. I think we have a caller on the air. So caller, you're on the air. Where are you from? What's your question?
Hi, I'm Lori. I'm calling from Berkeley. Nice to hear you guys again.
Hey, Lori.
Hi. So I have two questions. One is, I have a good friend who's having bursitis of the knee right now that's pretty uncomfortable, and I'm wondering if that.
Okay, you broke up a little bit there, Laurie. Sorry, I think you said that the person, would they benefit from frankincense for the bursitis?
Yeah, I'm wondering about that, or any other suggestions. Yeah. Bursitis of the knee, and then also, is sage tea good for night sweat?
What was that?
Is sage tea good for night sweats? Yes, it is good for night sweats.
And then behind that is Boswellia the same as frankincense? I kind of missed that.
Yes, Boswellia is the genus name, the Latin genus name of frankincense. So there's 4 main different species, but Boswellia is the genus name of all of them. Okay, so getting to your question, the first question there about bursitis of the knee, is it related to any rheumatoid or osteoarthritis or meniscal damage, or?
I don't really know. He does have some thick knuckles on his hand, now that I'm thinking about it.
Does he have a bursitis in only the one knee or both?
One knee.
Yeah, okay. I won't say this is the way it is all the time, but very often related to meniscal damage or cruciate ligament damage or tendon rupture and strain to the knee, especially in older people, I mean, purely because the articulation of the joints becomes less stable as time goes on, unless a person's very fit and active and is working and the muscles are strong and they're holding the architecture of the knee together because it's such a mobile joint. In terms of bursas and the fluid retention that's typically a characteristic of bursae, is the anti-inflammatory effects of Boswellia would definitely be indicated, and any quote-unquote non-steroidal anti-inflammatory also would have action blocking cyclooxygenase or interleukins, as these are typically elevated during that process of that water infiltration and edema that bursa is characterized by, because it's all an inflammatory mediated drive, and typically in response to tissue damage. So Boswellia as an ointment would definitely be well indicated. Boswellia internally, just to take it as an extract, would also be indicated. I think the thing with, there's something that you can get to topically that's also very good to drive along that pathway to be direct about it, as well as taking something internally anti-inflammatory.
And of course, depending on the severity, resting the knee, elevating ice if it's really inflamed, and not a lot of bending. A lot of times people get bursts when they bend on hard surfaces. So, stop the activity that is causing the fluid retention. And if it's really bad, sometimes you have to drain it. You have to have a doctor aspirate it. But definitely anti-inflammatories would be useful.
And what kind of dosage of the extract?
Okay, so when you ask that question, you have to quantify what extract you're talking about. So I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying that there are typically frankincense, because it is a oleogum resin, and it does have different strengths at which those particular chemicals I've talked about are more efficiently solubilized. In all honesty, you need to make a 95% extract of boswellia, and I don't know that anybody in the trade actually produces it. I think most frankincense extracts are produced at 50% ethanol. 50% ethanol will solubilize the AKBA and the boswellic acids, but not as efficiently as a high ethanol extract. And also, a high ethanol extract is more easily mixed and made miscible with the other components, of which things like lecithin phospholipids can be used to compartmentalize the compounds, to get them through the skin, through the bilayer, so they actually penetrate the tissue. Otherwise, you're going to find there's not a lot of carrier activity through the protective layer, which is the skin's main function. So, in short, to answer your question in short, a high ethanol extract would be certainly more useful, more favorable, but traditional frankincense extracts are made at 50%, will certainly have some of those compounds in there. Internally...
and he's meaning 95%, 90 to 95% alcohol tincture when he's saying extra, and I'm just speaking about extract, and 50% is what's commonly available in a frankincense tincture.
So if you looked into the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia, or probably the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia will list it too, the extract ratio 1 and 2 for boswellia would be made 2 to 3 ml per day, would not be uncommon, and probably more up to 4 or 5 ml per day would be an anti-inflammatory dose, again taken with food or post food. So that would be like a half teaspoon, maximum of twice a day, but more commonly 2/4 teaspoons per day to give you a half teaspoon daily dose, and that would be definitely realistic as an anti-inflammatory. And then if you found anybody who was actually producing a frankincense cream properly, and was able to get it through the skin by the addition of phospholipids and lecithins and other compounds to break down the skin, not to break it down in any bad way, but to make it more the pore, placing this material through the skin pores, which is a pretty good route of entry, then frankincense cream would be very useful. And then I think the other thing, not to say that if you're binding the knee up and you're actually able to bandage it, I think applying that kind of thing at night time when you're not so troubled by moving around with it would be a very good solution topically. The other thing I will say also, and this would be very much supported, Dr. Pete would totally have said this, Progest-E and progesterone on the knee would totally be anti-edema. So, all those things that promote water retention and inflammation, progesterone would be ideally suited to reduce that activity.
Okay. And how about using the ointment with DMSO?
Yeah, DMSO is a pretty good carrier through the skin. That's correct. Yeah. I was just trying to think of the other.
You have to be careful with DMSO because it can burn the skin with regular applications. You have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, I know about that. Okay. And sage is sage good for night sweats?
Yeah, in the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia, sage is a specific for menopausal hot flashes.
And you can make it as a tea, because you don't really need the essential oils from sage. So just brewing a tea is the best way for hot flashes.
And would you take that just before bed? 'Cause these are night sweats.
Yeah, that would be good. But you might want to, have one in the morning as well, just because you want to increase the level in your system.
Yeah, and this is very post-menopausal.
Well, sometimes night sweats are due to infections and other inflammation, or it can just be down to a poor storage of glycogen in the liver and low blood sugar at night, stimulating adrenaline and night sweats. So maybe, having a glass of orange juice and milk mixed together before bed, or orange juice and a piece of cheese, something to try to slow release the sugar or the fructose from the orange juice.
And again, progesterone would be indicated too, because if it's a quote-unquote menopausal-based change that has prompted it, then potentially estrogen is still fairly high, whereas progesterone would have dropped off significantly post-menopausal.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for your call, Lori.
Okay, and we have another caller on the air. Caller, where are you from, and what's your question?
I'm Mendocino. Do you have much experience with passion flower tea for insomnia?
Yeah, okay, passion flowers are well used. I will say this, that it's an additive effect, and so passion flower used chronically over a 6-week period will have an increasingly beneficial effect on insomnia. Its use in the treatment of insomnia is well known, but I think, again, like St. John's wort, it's not just going to happen just from a 1 or 2 day use of it. It's going to be additive in terms of affecting those pathways that set up that insomnia, whether it's adrenaline as a stimulatory sympathetic stimulant that keeps people awake, or whether it's lowering quote-unquote inflammatory pathways that are responsible for insomnia. So it's something that you need to be used fairly chronically, but I have had lots of people use passion flower specifically for insomnia.
In combination with chamomile?
Yeah, chamomile, again, it's typically a children's herb. It's more of an anti-inflammatory for the gut, so much more indicated really for digestive disturbance or inflammation related to the GI tract. I know chamomile has this quote-unquote children's safe label, and you can make tea for children of chamomile, and it's kind of very soothing and gentle and very innocuous, but not specifically related to insomnia.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, there's plenty of other herbs that are used for insomnia, depending on what type of insomnia and what's driving it. Whether or not it's things like valerian, which some people unfortunately can find very stimulating, and completely the opposite of what its sedative effects should be, in terms of acting on GABA and chlorine channels to kind of lessen that signaling that keeps people awake. Obviously things like skullcap, hops, California poppy. There's plenty of different herbs that have quote-unquote anti-insomnia activity, but passion flower is definitely up there with them. And then kava. Kava obviously is a muscle relaxant. That may be some of the reason, inflammation and just tenseness in general, and a nervous system that's just wound up, can't relax. So
what is that?
Say a kava.
Oh, with a K, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's plenty of different alternatives, and like I said, for passion flower, it needs to be used fairly long term, but will have an additive effect over time. And then again, from a perspective of pharmacology, a lot of people suffer from insomnia purely because stress hormones are rising during the nighttime fast, and as they're not consuming any sugars, but they're relying on the liver store, depending on how efficient the liver is at storing glycogen, to supply that over the nighttime fast to produce stabilized glucose, to control blood sugar. If the patient doesn't have very good glycogen stores, then they can wake up at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning because of the stimulating adrenaline-based sympathetic stimulation that happens in response to try and mobilize fatty acids to produce blood sugar. So there's more than one cause for insomnia, It's not always just lock and key. Sometimes it's hormone related. Sometimes it's more related to the patient's mental state, or stress, or just thinking things over too much, and they're not able to relax. Thyroid hormone ultimately would be part and parcel of the mechanism by which cells can relax and repolarize again. So give people rest to enable them to relax.
I can't get thyroid hormone because all my thyroid tests, and I have them all, are normal.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I know one will prescribe it.
yeah, that's half the problem. If you've ever listened to Dr. Pete, obviously he was a big advocate of taking temperatures and pulses, because essentially he did not believe that TSH was at all a well characterized and useful marker of thyroid hormone need as a signaler for thyroid hormone, and that your temperature and pulses would tell you much more about your metabolic rate and whether or not you're running on stress hormones, which can be running the physiology opposing thyroid. So yeah, whilst your thyroid labs, your TSH and your T3 and T4 might look normal, if you took a temperature and pulses after food, or before and after food, and you find any drop in your temperature, it's a very clear sign that stress hormones like adrenaline are running the show, especially if you have that drop in the morning when you wake.
Well, I'm always around 97.
Right, that's pretty low.
But that may be normal for some people.
Well, I quote unquote normal for some people is a kind of physiological next best attempt at keeping homeostasis. So it doesn't mean to say that it's normal for you. It just means to say that your body's next best attempt at trying keeping things stable is lowering your blood temperature, because your thyroid's being inactivated and you are not responding effectively to thyroid hormone, or you're blocking it in your diet, and your body is being forced, as it were, to slow down, and that brings about stress-related sympathetic stimulation to try and recoup that loss.
Well, how do you get the thyroid hormone if no doctor will prescribe it for you because you can't prove it?
You might want to try doing a Google search, a thyroid-friendly doctor, and or making a telehealth appointment with doctors online. There's several online organizations that will treat you from out of state. And if you'd like, we can send you a list of some organizations that might be able to help you. Groups of doctors that do telehealth.
Okay, I can email you, right?
Yes, that would be best. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your call.
Okay, you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM. From now, for the next 8 minutes, if anybody would like to call in with any questions, welcome to take the call. Otherwise, I'll just carry on here from the synergistic effects of frankincense. The number again, if you're listening and you want to ask a question, it's 707-923-3911. So the combination then, both of frankincense and myrrh, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, both in the Berseraceae, both are gum resins, both have very similar terpene components. Some are more separate than the other in terms of the AKBA that's not present in myrrh, but many of the terpenoids are shared, and well documented in traditional and modern studies showing that they are providing synergistic effects to each other, especially for anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, analgesic, pain-relieving, and antimicrobial activity. So mechanistically, synergy is attributed to the modulation of multiple biological pathways, including inflammatory cytokines, neurotrophic factors, and microbial cell targets. For example, frankincense-myrrh combinations significantly increase neurotrophic factors and suppress pro-inflammatory mediators in cellular and animal models, suggesting utility in neuroprotection and vascular disorders. So looking at the another study here showing that frankincense and myrrh administration reduce both thermal and mechanical hypersensitivity, and network pharmacology analysis implicated toll-like receptors as mediating neuroinflammation as the central mechanism. Furthermore, direct blockade of these toll-like receptors recapitulated the analgesic and neuroprotective effects observed with the herbal combination of myrrh and frankincense, supporting the key role of these pathways. These results suggest that frankincense, particularly when combined with other natural products like myrrh, offers promising synergistic potential for the management of neuroinflammatory and neuropathic pain conditions by targeting multiple inflammatory and neurosignaling pathways. It's good to see in 2023 that science is confirming what practitioners of herbal medicine, TCM, Ayurveda, etc. have long held true, that combination herb formula acts synergistically, and why I, as a medical herbalist, have never bought into the isolated chemical mantra of standardization and isolation. So looking at a lot of the different research that's been done, most of it actually is very current research from 2020, 2022, 23, 24 and 25. So in the last 5 years, plenty of studies have been done to show all of these things. Looking at the, excuse me, the drug quote-unquote delivery system employed for frankincense, for myrrh as preparations for many different things. I wanted us to quickly talk about some of the applications. So there are neuroinflammation and CNS diseases. So the findings here, the brain-targeted peptide shuttle was a drug delivery system for AKBA, as I mentioned, the boswellic acid, acetyl-11-keto boswellic acid. So found out that it significantly enhanced brain delivery and anti-inflammatory efficacy, improved blood-brain barrier penetration and therapeutic outcomes were observed. So this is for neuroinflammation and CNS diseases. So this is disease of the central nervous system. Now for cancer therapy, frankincense oil nano emulsions, again, the fact that these are made nano sized in terms of the particle size makes it much more likely to be taken up into the cell. Showing improved cellular uptake, enhanced cytotoxicity against drug-resistant cancer cells, and better disruption of mitochondrial function. So this is frankincense oil nanoemulsions. Now for self-nano-emulsifying drug delivery systems, they're called SNEDs, the SNEDs, self-nano-emulsifying drug delivery systems for boswellic acids. It was found that the enhanced antimicrobial and anti-proliferative activity was seen, and improved oral bioavailability as well as low-cost manufacturing. This was for lung cancer antimicrobial therapy. This is from a 2021 paper. It showed that also frankincense essential oil loaded chitosan nanoparticles showed enhanced anti-tumor effects, improved stability and controlled release for generalized tumor therapy, from a 2024 paper from Wang et al. We're looking at whey protein nanoparticle encapsulation for improved stability and sustained release of frankincense essential oil. This is for nutraceuticals and functional foods. For the improved bioavailability, stability, sustained release, and reduced toxicity for broad and various diseases in general, there are phytosomes and liposomes and microspheres that have been created essentially to produce a drug delivery system that will be absorbable, whether it's internal or through the skin, as I've mentioned, with phospholipids particularly as a carrier molecule. For osteoarthritis then, we had one caller here talking about bursitis, but randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials have shown topical frankincense extract significantly reduces pain and improves joint function in knee osteoarthritis patients. For rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, Crohn's disease, and collagenous colitis, systematic reviews and randomized controlled trials indicate clinical efficacy in reducing symptoms across inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. This was for a frankincense extract based on a 2400 milligram per day dose, which reduced also tumor cell proliferation in a breast cancer patient with statistically significant difference versus control with no serious adverse effects. So both the rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, Crohn's disease, and collagenous colitis, then as well as a breast cancer phase 1A trial, showed that the efficacy of frankincense was well reported. And then anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer activities from inflammatory diseases and preliminary anti-cancer effects from multiple clinical trials confirmed this. So generally safe, and to say that across many trials, frankincense extracts are generally safe and well tolerated with no serious safety issues reported. Again, I think this is another testament to herbal medicine, and particularly whole plant medicine, not just isolated specifics. Extremely good safety profile. I mean, I'm not kidding. Over the millennia that they've been used, compared to drugs and pharmaceuticals, like, give me a break. The adverse events reporting for drugs is horrendous. People don't even look at it and don't even know it. But if you were to put it side by side with herbal medicine, you'd find a stark difference between adverse events for herbal medicine and adverse events for pharmaceuticals. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to quickly talk about terpenes, boswellic acids, and volatile oils. And next month I'll be talking about myrrh and looking at myrrh in terms of all the studies surrounding its use. So let's see here, it's 4 minutes to 8 o'clock. Thanks to those people that have called in. As always, every third Friday of the month we'll be back in September with a roundup, at least the beginning of part 1, maybe a part 2 of myrrh. And then as the months go on, I'll be looking at Syrian oregano as an awesome candidate for treatment of disease, something that's, don't think it's that well known yet, but it's becoming a fairly hot topic, oregano syriacum. So let's see here, we can be reached at Western Botanical Medicine if you want to type that into a search. We've been in business here since 2003 producing certified organic extracts of medicinal herbs, and we've been practicing and treating patients here for the last 23 years in the States, but 30 years in total from graduation. And I'd love to help you and discuss your problems with you. So contact information can be found on our website, westernbotanicalmedicine.com. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name is Sarah Johannesson Murray. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Oops, total fail. Thank you for the lovely show. I should have had the right thing lined up here. I'm on theme songs, not the next show. Whoops. Here we go.